This is our 2007 Toyota Yaris, and today I'll show you how to do a dry and a wet compression test. A compression test is a good, cheap way to check the overall health of your engine, especially if you suspect a problem. Low compression test results are indicative of valves or piston rings that aren't sealing properly, which can lead to a loss of horsepower and possible oil consumption. While the testing procedure I'm about to show you will be the same for any car, the steps to remove the spark plugs and deactivate the ignition system, as well as the minimum spec for compression, will vary, so check with your service manual for those details if your car has a different engine than this one. If you're new to the channel, I'm testing the compression in our Toyota because it's been burning a lot of oil lately. I also purchased a Borescope so we can go inside of each cylinder and take a look at any wear or damage there might be, so we'll be doing that today too. Anyway, this is a pretty simple procedure, so let's get to it. Here are the tools that I used for this job. Socket wrench, torque wrench, a couple socket extensions, 5/8 magnetic spark plug socket, and a 10mm socket. For this job I also needed a magnetic bowl, an OBDII code reader, one padded glove, rubber gloves, a battery charger, a few teaspoons of oil, a plastic syringe, silicone tubing, a Boroscope, and a compression testing kit. Make sure that you get one that has the Schneider valve at the end of the hose and not inside of the pressure gauge. There are links in the description for everything I used. It's important to have a warm engine and a healthy, fully charged battery for this test, so I did this test after running some errands around town, but I needed a battery charger to keep the voltage up. I'll start by removing the plastic engine cover, which is secured with 4 10mm nuts. These plastic connectors can be tough to disconnect, and at this age, the plastic is brittle and the clips can break easily. I know because I broke 2 of them last time I did this. If they feel stuck, a good wiggle can help them come loose. We'll also need to unplug the fuel injectors in order to crank the engine without spraying fuel into the cylinders. Each coil is held in place with one 10mm bolt. Now the coils can be removed, but keep track of what order they're in so they can go back in the same spots. Use a 5/8 spark plug socket with an extension to remove the spark plugs. The spark plugs are still very hot, so I used a glove to keep from burning my hand. The spark plug from cylinder number 1 sure doesn't look very good. The last page of the Haynes repair manual for my Jeep has a spark plug diagnostic chart, but it's not too hard to figure out what's going on here. The thick black buildup around the edge of the plug is oil that's been baked on, and the flaky white stuff all over the electrodes is ash from burnt up oil. I've been thinking that the oil consumption is due to worn valve seals, but the compression test will help us figure out if it's actually the seals or if the piston rings are shot. I think the valve stem seals are leaking oil into the combustion chambers, and I've been trying different methods for slowing the leak, which I'll go over in a future video, but once I got the other 3 spark plugs out, I found that they all look just as bad. Now we're ready to start the test. Take the hose from your testing kit and screw it into the first spark plug hole as tight as you can. This kit came with several adapters, but I didn't need any of them for this car. Compare the threads on the hose with the threads on your spark plugs to be sure. Attach the gauge to the hose and set it down in a safe spot. With the parking brake set and the transmission in park or neutral, press the gas pedal to the floor along with the clutch pedal if applicable, and crank the engine until the needle on the gauge stops going up. The engine should need the same number of strokes to reach the maximum reading for each cylinder, otherwise there may be a problem. On this car, it took 8 to 10 cycles to reach the maximum reading. Write down each result so we can compare them later.
Only about 95 that time. I'm going to put a charger on this thing.
About 131. Make sure to release the pressure at the gauge before unscrewing the hose and moving it to the next cylinder. Repeat the test on each cylinder. The battery charger made a big difference, allowing the cylinders to reach higher results than before. The results got better every time after I connected the battery charger, so I ended up testing each cylinder 4 times before I felt like we had reliable results. $110. That one's only about 90. $147. Way better. $156. $129. $145. $165. About $116. About $153. $182. $195. $161. $150. $200. $210. The service manual says that, ideally, we should see 213 psi in each cylinder, with a minimum reading of 156 psi. It also says the maximum difference between cylinders should be 14 psi, but other sources I've come across say a difference of 10 to 15% is acceptable. The maximum difference I recorded was 57 psi between cylinders 2 and 4, which is about a 27% variation from the highest reading. Cylinder number 2 was the only one that didn't meet minimum compression spec, but cylinder 1 was also quite low. Interestingly, cylinders 3 and 4 both tested quite high. After 340,000 miles, I'm not too surprised to see a spread like that, but now I really want to know why we have 2 good cylinders and 2 bad ones. To be honest, I didn't look too closely at the results until I was editing this video, and the discrepancy here made me decide to take the car apart again and conduct a wet compression test to get a better idea of what's going on. To do this, I'll just repeat the test with a teaspoon of oil squirted into each cylinder, which will temporarily help seal between the piston rings and the cylinder wall. If the wet test produces higher results than the dry test, then there's probably leakage between the piston rings and the cylinder walls, either due to wear or broken piston rings. Little or no change in the wet test results indicates other leakage, probably from the valves. This will be especially helpful because I'm already considering replacing the valve stem seals, and the wet test should help me decide whether or not that's what I really need to do. It's been about a week and a half, and this is what all these spark plugs look like. Getting a little bit of ash buildup on the electrode, and a little bit of black buildup around the edge. Not too bad. All right, I've got the engine warmed up and taken apart. I've got the battery charger going again, and I'm gonna do the wet test using this plastic syringe with the help of a little silicone hose, so hopefully I don't get so much oil on the spark plug threads. If you get oil on the spark plug threads, then when you go to torque them down, they're gonna get tighter than they should because of the added lubrication. About 235. About 239. $239. About 239 again. I'm surprised at how consistent those numbers are, but unfortunately, this was a pretty conclusive test. The piston rings in this engine are shot. Maybe the valve seals are also bad, but there's no point in replacing them if the rings are shot. Replacing the piston rings would take a major engine teardown and rebuild. And if I do that, there's going to be a lot of other stuff to replace at the same time, and it's going to get expensive. I'm going to have to buy an engine hoist. I'm going to have to buy specialty tools, gaskets, sensors, timing chain. And at that point, it kind of makes more sense to just replace the engine. A quick eBay search shows that engines like this used are going for $500 to $1,000. And even if I got one, I wouldn't know what condition it was in. I'd probably still have to replace a bunch of parts on it. And even though this is a pretty small engine, it's still going to take a lot of time and work to replace it. So this is an unfortunate diagnosis, but what can I say? This thing has 340,000 miles on it. Even Toyota engines don't last forever. I'm not upset, I'm just disappointed. Also, despite trying to be smart and using the silicone hose to put oil down in there, I think I still got some oil on the threads because it was dripping every time I pulled it out. I don't really have a way to wipe those off or anything, so it is what it is. As far as diagnosis goes, any low compression results indicate a poorly sealed combustion chamber. Relatively even pressures that are below specification normally indicate worn piston rings and/or cylinder walls. Erratic values tend to indicate valve leakage. Dramatic differences between cylinders are often the sign of a failed head gasket, burned valve, or broken piston ring. The most conclusive way to diagnose low results is to do a cylinder leak down test, but I won't be doing that in this video. This requires a different testing kit, allowing you to pressurize each cylinder with compressed air. The rate at which air leaks out, as well as where the air leaks out, can accurately pinpoint the magnitude and location of the leak. So before attempting any repair that requires major engine work, use a leak down test to confirm what the problem actually is. The mixed results from the dry test and the major improvement with the wet test tell me that this car certainly has a problem sealing between the piston rings and cylinder walls, either from wear or broken rings. The lower results in cylinders 1 and 2 could be that they have broken rings, while cylinders 3 and 4 are simply suffering from extensive wear, but this could potentially even be due to a ruptured head gasket between those two cylinders. It would require further testing to properly diagnose that issue, and at this point, I don't think it's really worth my time, but maybe I'll do it anyway if that's a video you want to see. So I won't be planning to replace the valve seals after all, and we'll probably just keep driving this car until we can afford to replace it since it basically needs a new engine, but the oil consumption issue is only going to get worse the more we drive it. So that's my diagnosis, but before you go, let's take a look inside each cylinder with my Borescope to see if there are any obvious signs of damage. Right away, we can see there's a lot of carbon buildup on top of the piston. The wall of cylinder 1 still shows the factory bore marks, but there's also some very light scoring from wear. Looking upward now, there's a lot more carbon buildup at the top of the cylinder, but 2 of the valves look white, probably coated in ash like the spark plugs were. The other 2 valves appear to be completely coated in oil and carbon. Cylinders 2 and 3 are close to top dead center, so I'll have to take another look after cranking the engine to push them down. The top of the piston in cylinder 4 looks just like the others with lots of carbon buildup. There's some more scoring on the cylinder wall too. Oh, we're definitely burning oil. Yeah, that does not look good. After cranking the engine, we can get a better look at cylinders 2 and 3. A little bit of scoring there. What is that? I'm not sure what this mark is, but it almost looks like something impacted the top of the piston. I don't know what that is. And more of the same here. I have to assume that all of this buildup probably keeps the valves from sealing properly. And cylinder 3 looks just like the rest. A little scoring and a lot of carbon and oil. Tiny bit of scoring there, maybe. This picture really shows the ash deposits on the valves, which is why they look white. Based on these photos, it looks like all 4 cylinders are burning a similar amount of oil. That's not a fun thing to find, but I can't say I'm surprised by any of this. We could sell the car, but it's not worth much and we can't afford to replace it right now. We could keep driving it every day, making sure to top off the oil regularly, but the spark plugs probably won't last as long this time, and all that burning oil will eventually clog the catalytic converter. Or I could start looking into what it would take to replace the engine. This has been a great little car for us. It gets great gas mileage, it doesn't have any rust, and there's plenty of room for cargo in the back. But I also know it wouldn't be a very safe car to be in if we got into a major accident. New cars cost way too much now, and even a decent used car is going to be like $10,000. So there's a lot to think about. Leave a comment letting me know what you would do in this situation. All I can do right now is put everything back together and start weighing our options. I installed a new set of spark plugs because the old ones had been run for 77,000 miles and were starting to misfire. By the way, if you don't have a magnetic spark plug socket yet, get one. Reinstall the ignition coils into the same spots they came from, and secure each one with its 10mm bolt. They don't have to be too tight. Make sure you didn't lose any of these rubber grommets. Reconnect the wires as shown, making sure not to mix up the connectors. And don't forget to reconnect the fuel injectors. Reinstall the engine cover and secure it with its 4 10mm nuts. You can expect to see a lot of smoke the first time you start the engine after doing a wet compression test from the oil in the cylinders burning off. Now we're almost done, but if your check engine light came on, here's how to reset it. Locate the OBDII port under the dash and connect your code reader, then turn the key 2 clicks to the on position. My code reader connects to my phone via Bluetooth, but some of them have a wired connection. Scan the car for any codes that might have popped up, and when the scan is complete, there should be an option to erase the codes. The first 4 codes shown here are from cranking the engine with the coils unplugged when I did the compression test, and the 5th code is from the old spark plugs causing misfires, but you'll want to take note of any unrelated codes that show up before you erase them. After clearing the codes, turn off the car and disconnect your diagnostic tool because we're done. Next week's video will be over a year in the making, documenting the oil consumption issue on this car and everything I've tried to reduce it, so stay tuned for that. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe for more of the best DIY videos on the internet. And until next time, just keep throwing money at it.